Welcome back YouTubers to my channel of an everyday life of an Aspie. If you're new to my channel, I welcome you all. I'm Aspie. I'm all about creating mental health and awareness and sharing my life stories and experiences with autism, OCD and the like, and hopefully along the way you can journey with me and get to know me as a person and not just these everyday labels that we tend to, come in about. It's been brought to my attention, as I shared before, I'm trying to, as of late, try to finish up as much tidy ups as I can for the subjects that has been arisen in the Altogether Autism conference that was held in July, which I know sadly it is of late, but I humbly apologise in advance to you all. But as you know, as I said, some of these topics that I really want to clearly share will be a bit big, so I'll break it down into certain series bit by bit, hopefully, of some of the ones that I feel may need to be addressed regardless what they are. So this one especially will be touching base, and hopefully we can learn from each other about the autism and mental health with the substance abuse so that we can get a lowdown. So if you know of anyone or what have you that has experienced some of these things that I'm sharing, or some of these other signs and symptoms, as a disclaimer, I'm no medical doctor here, okay? I'm just your normal everyday Joe blog, sharing my life stories and experiences with what I can, along with tips and advice along the way. So if you see any warning signs and symptoms from what you have watched from my past or present videos as of late, do seek professional help for yourself or your loved one, or seek professional advice for yourself or your loved one, because I don't forever condone self-harm. In saying this though, also, as I said before, that I'm hoping to break these down as much as I can. So this one's all about what I said, the autism and addiction or substance abuse. I'll do as much as I can based on my findings, along with some of the stuff that has been shared at the presentation and maybe my thoughts on it. So bear with me. I know this one's probably going to be a real broad topic, but it needs to be addressed because some of the information here in New Zealand where I'm based at is limited at the moment. We don't have that much information or research on it, so some of it will be based on maybe some other findings through overseas that I do, be it America, Aussie, UK, what have you, of what I share of these everyday topics. But as I said, hopefully sometime in the near future there'll be more and more information in regards to these, hopefully in New Zealand where I'm based at, to help assist us in any way we can. So enough of the jibber jabber, obviously, from me for now. This one's going to be the hidden link between autism and the addiction. So smash the like button if you're liking some of these videos, or leave a comment below just to let me know, so that hopefully in future reference I can actually do a continuation of these series or what have you, because I believe that, as I said, with my aims to try and raise awareness as much as possible, as well as understanding of certain everyday topics, be it if it's mental health, be it if it's stuff that's included about the autism community versus everybody else in the communities of where I want to be to share as an advocate, mentor, or whatever it may be. So this one's basically, as I said, the hidden link between autism and addiction. So let's begin this. There has been until recently some researchers that has held that addiction among people with autism is very rare, although there wasn't much solid evidence for this view of their findings. It may seem plausible, though, that many people with autism have a penchant, strict belief for following rules, guidelines, expectations, and that which would seem to make them less likely to try alcohol or illegal drugs, or, as I said before, about how some autistics tend to keep to themselves and may feel the need to be included, and they'll do anything to follow through that pattern just to do so. Because people with autism are usually often isolated from their peer groups, this could protect them from peer pressure, and that can lead to youthful experimentation like any other normal person would. And many people diagnosed with autism decades ago, though, had some severe features. A person who can't live independently had few opportunities to become addicted. But now there has been a new recent study in Sweden, however, that suggests people with autism who have average or above average IQ levels or intelligence quotients are more than twice as likely to become addicted to alcohol or any other form of drugs as their peers would. The risk is even higher for people who also have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. This study is the first to look at the generous for addiction among people with autism. Other further research is also finding unexpected biological and psychological commonalities between these two conditions. These two fields have really developed independently, but there could be a lot of cross-fertilization of assistant professor of neuroscience at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities in Minneapolis, of Patrick Rothwell, quoted this. In 2016, though, however, Patrick Rothwell opened a lab focused on studying the biological and behavioral parallels between addiction and autism. There are similarities in ways where either this condition used repetitive behaviors to cope with emotional problems, as well as their impulsivity and compulsions. The two conditions affect some of the same brain regions and may involve some of the same genes that is related in these two conditions. These connections are spurring a new area of research that could eventually help improve both autism care and addiction treatment, along with prevention. For much of the 20th century, however, most of those who received an autism diagnosis were on the severe end of the spectrum. In this largely non-verbal population world, addictions may seem highly unlikely. But in 1994, however, when the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders has added Asperger's syndrome as a category, the spectrum extended to people who had much more opportunity to access alcohol and other drugs. So for years, the assumption remained that addiction was one main concern in the autism community that could be safely ignored. When Espen Avernick reviewed the literature for a paper he had published last year, he found only 18 studies that looked at the overlap between autism and addiction, however. Each of them looked mainly at select samples such as people being treated for addiction or those caught up in the criminal justice system, rather than the general population as a whole. In his findings, he said, "I found being amongst groups of people very stressful." Anovic found that combined prevalence of alcoholism and addiction in people with autism ranged from 0.7% to 36% because the data was so varied. The range couldn't be narrowed down by any further. However, most studies suggest a significantly lower prevalence in the general population, says Anovic, Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of Oslo in Norway, where he's from. In the United States, however, the lifetime prevalence of alcoholism is 14%. For other substance addictions, however, the figure hovers around 2 to 3%. There is some overlap between these groups, as I've clearly mentioned slowly. Given the prevailing impression that addiction is uncommon among people with autism, the findings of the Swedish study came as a surprise to many. The study analysed National Health Registry records of the 1.3 million Swedes who were born between 1973 and 2009 and identified 26,986 people diagnosed with autism. The researchers also determined how many of those with autism had an additional diagnosis of intellectual disability, substance use, or ADHD. Overall, an autism diagnosis doubles the risk of addiction, the research has been found. Elevated risk is concentrated among those with an IQ of 100 or above. But across the spectrum, ADHD is a great multiplier of this risk. Among those with autism and intellectual disability, having ADHD increases the risk of addiction fourfold. Among those with an IQ in the typical range or above, ADHD increases the risk eightfold. Parents and siblings of people with autism also have a high risk of addiction, suggesting an autistic or genetic link. These findings don't necessarily conflict with early data showing low addiction risk among people with autism, says Paul Larkinson, Professor of Genetic Epidemiology at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, who worked on this case study alone. The main takeaway, he says, is that risk varies with the varied levels of intellectual disabilities. Previous research has shown or often included a much higher proportion of people with intellectual disability would have skewed the results. On the other hand, though, however, autism is often diagnosed later in Sweden than in the US, and the proportion of people at the moderate end of the spectrum may be higher. That may cause the increased in addiction risk to look larger than it is. Notes Jeremy Vanistra van der Wiel, Associate Professor of Psychiatry at Columbia University. He said, I would want to see whether this paper's findings hold up when autism follows the typical pattern of relatively early recognition rather than a quite a late diagnosis. Another possibility, given the wide variety of people on the spectrum, it's possible that some types of autism raise risk, whereas others lowers it. The Swedish finding comes as least of a surprise to people with autism. Matthew Tinsley, who is now 55, had always looked to alcohol and prescriptions just to reduce his anxiety. Tinsley is an author of Asperger's syndrome and alcohol drinking to cope, one of the few books on the subject since he has been sober since 2004. From an early age, he would take his mother's anxiety medications when he felt overwhelmed. I found being amongst groups of people very stressful is the reasoning behind this. Narcotics are on the spectrum. In college, he discovered that alcohol would help also ease socializing. Everyone else is drinking is socially acceptable, and if you drink, you fit in because everyone else is doing it. He says it took the edge off. By the time he was in his 40s, Tinsley, as he was drinking lethal amounts of alcohol, 3 litres of gin every day. This led to cirrhosis, and he entered rehab in 2004. As in Stoner's case, his autism diagnosis in 2005 came as a relief. Once he realised there was an explanation for his sensory and social difficulties, he began to be kinder to himself and found healthier ways of coping. The link between autism and addiction, however, is also unsurprising to some of the clinicians who are doing their research, who works with people on the spectrum. Valerie Gores, a psychologist in the New York City area, says her clients with autism who have drinking or drug problems, many of the older ones turn to alcohol, whereas the young ones tend to use marijuana. Eric Hollander has seen in a similar pattern. However, he says he treats behavioural addictions such as gambling. I work with a lot of people with autism who have all kinds of impulsive behaviours, says Hollander, director of the Autism Obsessive Compulsive Spectrum Program at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. In fact, that's one of the main targets when people come in for treatment. If they're out of control in terms of shopping, on the internet or gaming, and they're just addicted to the internet. Hollander has looked at similarities between obsessive-compulsive disorders, addictions, and the impulsive and compulsive behaviours that occur in people with autism. He proposes that these conditions, all characterised by repetitive thoughts and behaviours, should be grouped together as obsessive-compulsive spectrum disorders in the diagnostic guidelines. It was a lifting of so much guilt and shame in many ways. Impulsivity, acting quickly without thinking, and compulsivity, being unable to stop an activity once it has started, are both the problems of self-control or executive function. Impulsivity is strongly linked with the risk of becoming addicted. Addiction is defined as compulsive drug use that persists despite negative consequences. People with autism show signs of both impulsivity and compulsivity. For example, they frequently engage in repetitive compulsive behaviours, stimming, to address either lack of sensory stimulation or osophagia. In the case of addiction, different types of addictive drugs can enhance or reduce sensation. Addiction is known to be linked to changes in the striatum, a central region of the brain involved in pleasure, motivation, and habitual behavior. During a period of addiction, control over drug-related behaviors shifts from one region of the striatum to another. Before drug use devolves into addiction, drug-related brain activity occurs primarily in the ventral area, which is involved with the motivation in seeking pleasure. At this stage, people take drugs mainly because they offer either comfort or joy. The ventral region seems especially connected to impulsive behavior, but as addiction progresses, some of the action moves towards the dorsal striatum, a region involved in autonomic behavior, into more programmed patterns, which may be set off by specific cues. This automation can be useful when it processes a complex dance move or any other complex skill into a single wild action, but it can also create a compulsion that, once unleashed, becomes difficult to restrain. The compulsion could be drug use, but it could be also repetitive behaviours on autism. In both cases, the striatum drives the persistent behaviour. It's possible that in people with autism or addiction, the striatum is more prone to getting stuck in the repetitive pattern. Behavioural patterns become very difficult to change once they're well practiced, says Rothwell, who is among the few researchers who study both autism and addiction. This is definitely a concept that I think is very relevant, both of the repetitive symptoms of autism and the habitual patterns of addiction. Genes involved in the autism-related conditions Rett syndrome and Fragile X syndrome also has shown up in the addiction research. Neuroscientists were started to find that MECP2, which is mutated in Rett syndrome, becomes highly active in the brain when rats are given access to large amounts of cocaine. FMR1, the gene mutated in Fragile X syndrome, seems to have a similar relationship to cocaine addiction. A better understanding of the connections between autism and addiction could provide important therapeutic insights into both, says Robert Malenka, professor of psychiatry at Stanford University in California, who worked with Rothwell on the NLGN3 research. Clinicians in one field should pay attention to what is going on into the other field. Autism and addiction research have already converged into one medication, baclofen, a drug approved in the US for treating muscle spasms. A version of baclofen is in trials for treating autism and the related Fragile X syndrome. The drug is also widely used in France to treat alcoholism, although clinical trials have shown mixed results in this path, and preclinical research suggests that it may help treat opioid and cocaine addiction. For people on the spectrum who have addictions now, however, getting help can be challenging. There is not a single study on the best way to treat these individuals, however. In fact, there's reasons to believe that most addiction treatments are poorly suited to people with autism. Addiction therapy is mainly conducted in group sessions with strict rules requiring members to participate and articulate emotional problems. People with autism may respond to these expectations with anger and anxiety, which counsellors may misinterpret as a form of defiance. For those who are so obligated to participate by the criminal justice system, failure to comply can even lead to incarceration. Stoner, for one, says he's had difficulty with rehab because he was made to spend many hours in group therapy and 12-step programs, including Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, "I've had a really hard time getting into that." So he says, "When faced with speaking in front of a group or at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, my mind goes absolutely blank." He also has difficulty connecting with other members. He was rejected twice before he found someone to be his sponsor or recovery mentor. Given these difficulties, programs to help people with autism who have addictions may need to rely less on group therapies and more on individualized care. Stoner now works as a peer specialist at the Kenmore Club, a government-funded project of the Rappahannock Area Community Service Board in Virginia. He says the organization's more personal approach is better suited to his needs. The staff train people with various forms of developmental and psychiatric disabilities to help one another. Until more research is done, he says people with both autism and addiction will find their own way to best care. Well, this quickly ends basically the hidden link between autism and addiction. Smash the like button, comment below, feel free to follow me on my social media site. Feel free to also subscribe to my channel if you feel to be part of my YouTube family and want to journey with me along this way. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can keep up to date of what Aspie's been up to. Feel free to share these videos around, as I said, because some of these that are coming up with next, especially from my research as well as some of the stuff I've been reading from, hopefully will be raising an awareness for everybody. So enough to do, guys. Thanks for your support. Thanks for following.